Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 6. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing Annie Krabbenschmidt's first novel, actually. And then we'll be reviewing A Portrait of a Lady on Fire with guest reviewer Liz Faraim. And then Baz and I will share what's won our week, so stick around. But now, on to the interview. Annie is living in their native San Francisco. She teaches 10th grade English, and her debut book came out this spring. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me both.
Our pleasure. So, what drew you to writing? Why?
What drew me to writing? Wow, if I could take it back. No, I feel like...
Girl, same.
I think we're getting a lot of those bags. We're going to have a lot of girls same today. I feel like this is something that I was not a scribbler as a kid where I was writing in journals, but I was kind of a performer and attention hog and needed to be doing things for people's entertainment. So I guess I've always thought of it as more as a storytelling origin story rather than a writing origin story. Where I've always just been wildly drawn to entertaining adults in my life. We're not going to Freudian analysis that, but definitely was eager to make people laugh and entertain folks. And so I feel like I've always had that bent to me. And then it wasn't until grad school, I think, that someone called it writing for me and said, you're a writer. And I was like, no, I'm very social. I'm a jock. I do all and it was more about the fact that I just couldn't stop sharing my opinions about things. And so it was then that I was like, oh, maybe I should try to write this down. And so thus began the torment that we're still loving and living every day.
Nice. All right. So let's talk about it. And I've avoided saying the title of your novel or your book because it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Fred, an Unbecoming Woman. Tell me about that title.
I wish people would spend more time because it took me years to find this title.
Really?
Yes. No, it definitely was not born Fred, just like me. No, but it wasn't born Fred. It was, I don't remember what lame title I was going to call it, but I reached a point in the very middle of the book where I realized that I'll just give some spoilers, but there is a moment where I discuss a camp alter ego of mine named Fred, where it was so clear that I was coming alive as this person, Fred. And it occurred to me that the rest of my life was me wishing that I could be Fred. Maybe not in a very specific, I need to rename myself, or I need to regender myself, or I need to do any of these things. It was more like, wow, that person had a spiritual energy to them that they were so nerdy. And I think I tried to hold the air of coolness when I was at home or in school. I had an older sister who was just inherently beautiful and popular. So I feel like I had to kind of keep up those social norms. But yeah, at camp, I was doing really dorky stuff when everyone else was doing water sports. I was learning how to batik a t-shirt or building things in wood shop. So I was like, wow, she was really unapologetic about her nerddom and called herself Fred, which I think is such a queer narrative of naming yourself and owning your own name in the way that makes sense. So that's the first part, Fred. And then just because I really like to stick in the subversion there, Fred is also an unbecoming woman. And the unbecoming woman hit me when I was reading Kate Mann's book Down Girl. And it's about all of the different tools of misogyny and how they continue to draw us all in, of all genders. And a lot of it is about social punishment and repercussions of acting out in a way that isn't necessarily acting out in a way that is not in accordance with what you're supposed to be doing. I guess the definition of acting out. But yeah, she talked about how unbecoming women were the most punished women. And so I really enjoyed the kind of wordplay of unbecoming in the sense that I was unraveling my womanhood and steering clear from that and unbecoming that. And also Michelle Obama took it from me, but no, I like the opposite of Michelle Obama is the fact that I had to dismantle all of these things before I could get to my becoming debut. So I think that like unbecoming all of these things that I was, and then the fact that it also references this wayward woman who is misbehaving, is why that's the way it is.
Nice. So,
Excellent.
should we dive into some of the themes of the book?
Sure.
So, coming out seems to be a big one. And it seems like you've covered multiple comings out, actually.
The comings of outs, yeah. Yes, I read one review recently.
There was a whole series of closet doors.
I read one review was like the only thing I took away from this book was that you have to come out all the time. It's like, well, that was part of the goal, but
Bingo.
Yeah. And I do think that's like such an important thing to talk about for folks, and it's not new. I think people do discuss it openly, which is great, but my table of contents has just deliberately drawn on the fact that there's so many different coming out moments. And it's also a bit of a humble thing because I'm like, this time I really did it. Like this time I finally came out. Now it's really done. I'm ready to go. And then you are hit with another round of, oh, I didn't come out about that thing. Or like, I haven't self-actualized yet. But it's the way that we have to carry that with us every day. It's the way that we have this myth that has actually caused a burden for me, and I'm sure for many others, that once you come out, things are good, finally. And then, like all humans, we have growing up to do in different ways. So coming out's a big theme. I actually started with my main quote coming out story on purpose because I think a lot of queer books end with that. Yeah. As the success. And I think for me, I went overnight from I'm just a chill dude who is waiting for the right guy to, oh, wait a minute, I am repulsed by every single person in this room and I'm actually gay. And so like actually relatively short amount of time spent quote in the closet. Even though you could look at my childhood and say, oh, that girl is in there. But yeah, I feel like I didn't spend that long dealing with whether I should or shouldn't. I was like, I need to take care of this as soon as I possibly can. So I start with that and think that I'm walking around as this liberated person, and then realize time and time again that I'm dealing with all of the ways that our social life has impacted me and made it more difficult for me to actually be authentic rather than out of the closet. So yeah, it starts with coming out and then kind of tries to go backwards and unravel all of the ways that I've been kind of like messed up by all the social expectations that were around me and unpeople like me.
Right. And
so I see it not so much as a series of closet doors. I now, after hearing you say that,
those were your words, Baz.
I think of it as a hallway of the doors, but it's more like Scooby-Doo, where they're going back and forth.
You know, I've never thought of it that way, but now that I'm seeing it, I can't unsee the cinematic beauty of that. Like, and like one of them, you're opening the door, but my tail is still in the other door, and you're like, wait a minute,
exactly,
that's my tail.
See yourself going by.
Well, the added complexity to this and how the world treats this is how it affects others. My parents are wonderfully supportive. They've known since I was like pre-20. They love my husband. We get along great. My dad recently came to me because my husband had suggested he go to our dentist. And my dad came to me and the dentist had asked how he knew Jason. And my dad froze in the dentist's office. He's like, I didn't know if I could tell them that he was my son-in-law. And I'm like, Dad, Jason and I promote the Schitt's Creek world where it's just normal. Yes, it's fine. But my own dad was not sure if he could out me or not at the dentist's office where I go to get my teeth cleaned.
They know what's in there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just, you're right. The levels of it, how it impacts our lives, how it impacts the lives of those who support and love us, it's huge.
Yeah, and I'm in that, it's such a bittersweet thing when we look at our family members, right? Because in that moment, he's trying to protect you. It's not, there's no malice. It's not like, oh, I'm ashamed of my queer son. It's like, or queer child, I should say. But yeah, he's not doing it out of malice. He's doing it because he cares so much. But
Right.
then we get caught in these levels of care. I remember similarly the very first day that I came out to my family, which is actually a very like footnotey moment in my book because it was like such a small thing.
Hmm.
Um, but because I knew exactly, like I grew up in the Bay Area, so like once I could declare it, they would be, oh, okay, this is what it is. That's hardly the problem though. But the morning after, my dad came down because I went to school at Duke in North Carolina, which obviously Duke is not North Carolina, but is there, and they've never been to the South before, so they had no idea. But they were like, first thing he said was, "Is campus safe for you?" And in that, I saw his imagination is, am I going to be bullied or am I going to be attacked or something like that?
Right.
I have not known in the recent generation of life on campus for there to be any physical violence against queer people.
Good.
That doesn't mean that it's yes, good. Yes, pause good. That's amazing. That doesn't mean that there's not that the word safety is set right. It's
Right.
like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more to it, and it was hard. I mean, it just not because I was worried about someone grabbing me or you know, but it was hard to just kind of steel yourself for that life every day. So yeah, the question of safety is such an interesting word that can mean something specific to some people and then something for especially queer folks. I think we understand, and any marginalized folks, we
Hmm.
understand safety to be this really complicated thing.
Right.
Yeah, but not knowing, yeah,
Plus, I think that, to Vance's point about his story about his father, I think that's the closest our loved ones come to understanding our coming out process.
Hmm.
mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Ooh,
So
okay.
you kind of get, it's like, and I don't think we bring that to light to them that, oh, that was a coming out, because
Yeah, right.
you had to experience oh, do I change pronouns, do I, so,
Right.
but we don't often draw it out for them and say, well, that's what I live all the time,
And
right there.
we
Yeah,
should though. I mean, it's a good
yeah,
moment of like, hey, try this times a million, you know.
Hmm.
yeah, exactly.
Not to belittle what your dad was aiming to do, but
Right.
Yeah, but it gives them a flavor of what our lives are like.
Right. So one of your other themes is identity, and even the title suggests that you played with a different energy completely in terms of your identity.
you mean at camp?
Yep.
Yep. And this is honestly coming to a head for me in my current life, and it's so weird with book writing because the last quote chapter that when I said to myself I finished the first draft, even though we all know, haha, Annie had no idea what was coming for him. Like when I thought I had finished the first draft of the book, it was like I am a cis woman, I am just a lesbian, I'm blah blah blah. And then over the course of the 2 or 3 years it took to edit, finish, sell, publish, here I am now. So much has already changed about this. So in a way, it's almost like a Phantom Menace version of prequel,
Oh no.
where you're like, there's a bit of foreshadowing. There's a bit of, not that I meant to, but there's a bit of like, maybe you should check in about your gender and ask some queer friends if they can help you sort through this because, ah, again, with this store analogy, which I'm now really grabbing hold to, but um, it's a lot of I'm not this, I'm that, I'm not that, I'm this. If I'm not this, then I can't be that. I want to be that, but I don't know how. There's so many doors and boxes that feel like you have to hop from one to the other
Hmm.
and rule some out or but the reality is obviously it's all so much more fluid and amorphous than simply saying, oh, I'm not a straight woman, I'm a gay woman. Oh, I'm not a gay woman, I'm a like gender fluid, or I'm pansexual or there's just so many different layers to this. And so I think what's currently on my mind, and so I'll just speak to that, is that in the aftermath of Fred, there's so much like declaring that happens, and so much I'm finally here. And we already talked about this, but yeah, that identity, I think, is the thing that's like almost the elephant in the room that needs to get talked about more. Because I feel like I did a lot of external work of, okay, I'm not there, I'm here, I'm not here. And now I'm like, oh, now we have to really get to the inside of the hurricane here. I didn't really answer your question, but
Well, no, in a way you did, and I think it's interesting because I think one of the positives of what you just said, hidden within all of those layers, is that we are at a point in our queerdom as a community where we're having those deeper discussions. Because from my generation, the Gen X, we it was like we grew up and we still grew up. We didn't have social media. We didn't have, you literally had to hunt for your community and your found family. And that was not an easy process in many cases. And so I think now that, as you say, you were on campus and your queerdom didn't seem to be a big, oh my gosh, I got to be careful kind of situation. So that's great, positive, agreed. But at the same time, there are other things that we've never been able to get to because, and I think this is something that we need to impart to the cis het world, that they think, oh, now we're all concentrating on pronouns, and oh, we're not. Well, it's because we're having deeper discussions as a community, because we're now able to get rid of that upper layer, that glass ceiling that kept us in these very rigid boxes, because we needed them in order to claim our rights so we could identify it for mainstream society. And now we're at a point where that's gone. We've pretty much gotten rid of that. And we have most of society behind us now. There are still problematic areas. But I think like you said, you having that deep discussion and unveiling other layers, I think it's a positive that our community is now at that place where we can do that and have those conversations, and I think your book leans in that direction.
it's leaning, and it's not yet stepping its foot in that direction, but it's definitely leaning. Vance, did you want to reply to that?
You've got the sock off
and
your toes right above the water.
Ready.
No, go ahead with your thoughts first.
Gosh, it's so, and I work now with high schoolers, and so, and I hate to be cliche, but they teach me so much. But seriously, like watching a new generation deal with these things is so interesting. But I distinctly remember discussing like demisexuality, which I feel like that's more where I live than someone who does not need social emotional connection in order to have a romantic intimacy with someone. And it's just also feels like a personality trait where it's like, yeah, like I need to get to know people. Well, there's a lot of Liz Lemon references in the book, so I don't need to repeat them, but I don't want to I can't anyway, doesn't matter. My sex life is not the point of this podcast, but but I was telling a friend what that meant to me, being like, oh, I think that I'm leaning in this kind of world of demisexuality. And she is someone who is like, quote, straight. And then she was like, well, you said that. And I just felt like I'm a little, like, that felt like me, but I'm a little scared. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, in the queer community, we are starting to identify fluidity and starting to lead into fluidity, much to all of our benefit. It's a little alarming, it's a little scary, but ultimately I think that it's really good because, like we've already talked about, it's not about the boxes, it's about trying to own whatever we're owning. So when I see kind of a typical, quote, cishet person be like, wait a minute, am I queer? I'm like, yes, but also I can see your hesitancy. Yes, in the sense that we all could learn from queerness, right? Queerness has so much to teach everyone about losing some of these things and letting go of the feeling that if you are this, you must be that as well. So I feel, yeah, as we unravel this, as our queer community is doing, and obviously I'm like, we get the benefits first because we did the work, but I think that But like really, and it's so hard to imagine like my father being like, where am I on the queer spectrum? But I do think that everyone could do that and really benefit from thinking like, wow, I don't have to be these things that people tell me I have to be, and it's really hard and scary, but I could learn from my queer people and see how to face these challenges. And so yeah, I really totally agree with what you said, Baz.
I'm very glad you went there first, actually, because you brought up the fluidity and the who am I going to be, where am I going to be. The argument, the therapist who helped me the most helped me look at the world and specifically said, almost everybody you see is trying to figure out where they fit in the world. Why don't you go forward and be you and let them fit in around you? And that was powerful. That one
That is
gave me the
powerful.
that gave me the courage to just be myself. When I'm in a
Wow.
conversation, this is my husband, life goes on. And it's amazing how if you just state like, here's my husband, we're going to go out to dinner, blah, blah, blah. Everybody just sort of stops for a minute, but then they accept it. They fit in around that and everybody moves on.
Wow.
Now, it takes a lot of work to get to where that's natural. And
Hmm.
I'm not knocking that. That's a super simplistic, statement. But at the same time, it was the right statement for me.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of one of the most helpful pieces of advice I got from a therapist, slightly unrelated to sexuality, but also not really, like, feels really on the nose too, is like whatever system you're talking about, family system, social system, it can move like a hurricane,
Mm-hmm.
and it just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going, and the force is already in it. And if you are someone who's realizing that that system is not working, and this is actually maybe a slightly more sinister version of what you're saying, but I like the optimism, and I think that we should be moving. The end result is the same, but for like you said, not to belittle the journey of that. So I'll give you some of the where that journey starts getting a little rough, and then we can all be stronger together. Is if you decide to step out of that hurricane is still moving really
Mm-hmm.
fast, really hard. It wants you back in. Like it is trying to get you to come back into the hurricane where you belong, in quotes. And so, stepping out of it, you're really having to hold fast to that for a while as you watch the hurricane almost like combust on itself. But then the ultimate goal is what you're saying, which is let those folks, if they want you back in their lives or in their fabric, like they'll have to stop the hurricane for themselves too and come to you and be like, okay, well, like, wow, you put your foot down. This is how I want to show up now. And what can we do? So, yeah, I think you're right. It's a very long process to get there. But I love that advice and it gave me chills to hear it. So, thank you for sharing it.
You're welcome. All right, so back to your book. Let's set the therapy down.
Sorry.
No. I brought it up too.
No.
But media influence. How did that impact the book? Where's the
I
impact in the
love
book?
it. Gosh, I love television. I love books. I love movies. I think I just get so attached to these storylines in so many ways. And I feel like that's such a queer origin story of like seeing yourself in media or not seeing yourself in media. So I've already mentioned Liz Lemon once, but I will say it again. I for sure was like, this is my woman icon. I'm going to go forth. Men will not be something that I have to think about until it's like I'm 40 and I'm, the head producer of whatever. Doesn't really matter. Just like someone in charge of their life. Um, and then that was so liberating for a moment. And then when I realized it wasn't like that, I was like, ah, oh, man, I'm not Tina Fey. I'm just a queer person. Like it's not because I'm better than boys. It's because I didn't ever liked boys in the first place. And so, but there's such a play back and forth of that, which I think is so sincere, which is why I love when my students talk about what their media interests are, because these things are living and breathing both independently and inside us, and then we're seeing ourselves in them. And so it's just, they're just as alive as two people interacting, right? We create something by being passionate about a piece of media. So, but specifically for this book, the queer media narrative, and it's honestly even hard to remember this now that we're in 2023, that there were no queer characters. Like, like truly Will and Grace, and that's all I can think of in terms of actual characters that had lines and weren't dead. Like it it's honestly so even incomprehensible now. I've gotten so used to already. Like what I just watched that the new That 70s Show reboot, and there's a queer character, and I was like, well, this is the thing that we never ever discussed in 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So the villainy of queerness, I think, was something that I was really interested in growing up because it was always a threat. It was always a, especially, I don't want to say especially for women, but like from the angle of women, it seemed like the specific threat was like, oh no, there's going to be, Janice Ian's going to be at your birthday party and she's a lesbian, and like the threat of being some sort of like sexual predator, which I know is also something that's really big still for the trans community, and it's probably big in a different way for gay men, but all of these different layers of villainy that were assigned to queerness before we were able to see ourselves in television. So that was something that really stuck with me, because I was like, the only way I've seen queerness was as a punishment, and therefore I don't want to be punished. I don't want to be in a position where people are wondering what my intentions are, which, caused its own little thing where I'm like, oh, I can't look at anyone. Like, caused its own little backlash. But yeah, I think the media is so important, because as much as we think words can't hurt us, like, yeah, they can. Come on. Like, words are some of the most dangerous thing you could possibly imagine, right?
They shape the direction of society.
Yeah.
100%.
Although it's interesting, because my parents also taught me that words have the power that you give them. So, that's one of the teachings, which is why for me, I mean, it's really interesting for me to hear you guys talk about this, because I kind of classify myself as fearless and stupid, because I'm just queer, and I was queer from the time I was a kid. I was acting out Funny Girl as Barbara Streisand as an 8-year-old boy, so I've always had that fearlessness in being who I was. And it was always, girl, catch up. That was always my outlook. So hearing people who have a different perspective, and even for you, someone in the Bay Area, for God's sakes, dealing with that. And you're in literally the bubble of queerdom that there can be, and it's refreshing to me that, that I get those perspectives, because for me, it's just been, I am who I am, catch up, and
that's beautiful.
and like I say, I don't know if that's fearless or if that's just rampant stupidity on my part. You know what I mean? So there's my struggle.
Yeah. Isn't our goal in life to try and find the balance between those two things, though, But I do think that you touched on something that is like the main impetus for me writing this book was what you said, which is like, I can't believe in the Bay Area this is what you're dealing with. And that was the thing that stuck me with me for years, was I cannot believe I'm from the Bay Area and I'm dealing with this, because I have it so much better. I know my mom loves gay people in the way that some women have their, anyway, it doesn't matter. We're not here to,
okay, Mom.
We're not here to talk about the ladies who want to have a gay man friend around. But like, yeah, there's we could go on to this forever, so I won't, but just the idiosyncrasy of being in the Bay Area, being so close to where all of these things were born and played out, and then feeling like, whoa, there's no one out at my high school right now. That's weird. Or, whoa, my older sister and her friends use some slurs sometimes in a way that's like, I don't think you're directing at anyone, but the fact that that slur exists for you means that this is not a safe place. So in that sense, like, words being powerful is like, it wasn't because they were pointing them at me and making fun of me. Well, they were, but they weren't being like, we know this thing about you and we want to poke you for it. It's like, you are doing this thing that kind of makes it seem like you could be this. And because we know that could never, ever be true, we're going to make sure to make fun of you for it. Which then reinforced this, oh, okay, I guess if I continue acting the way that I'm going to act, then I'm going to have to deal with these consequences. So
Yeah, and there was, I mean, I wrote my series and I placed it in the Bay Area purposely because I wanted to show the subtlety of that oppression that occurs, that even though you're in the bubble, there's still this ever-present kind of oppression that happens without them even consciously realizing that they're causing it sometimes.
Yes, and again, another reason why it's so important to talk about this because um yes, I want to honor stories of like true heroism where someone is against all odds being themselves and like girl catch-upping and like just being this kind of brave figure. Um but for me, I just thought we hadn't seen the nuance like you're talking about of where we're still not getting it right in terms of we think that we're in the Bay Area and we think that we've conquered this issue. We don't think that bigotry exists. And thankfully, in the last 5 or 10 years, we were all having a bit of a gut check where we're like, okay, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Like California
Mm-hmm.
isn't just this beautiful picture of equality. So what do we do? So I think that this conversation is now definitely at the forefront, where I felt like because it was the viewpoint that I could offer, it felt really important to me to like really crack it open and say,
Right.
you guys are all kind and thoughtful, but here's what we're doing wrong.
Right. Right.
In the interest of time, I do have to ask, is there anything else you want folks to know about the book that we haven't covered?
No, I think that my goal is to feel like I'm carefully taking care of the reader and trying to like help them along the way of some difficult topics. So I guess my goal was to like never make someone feel unsafe, like uncomfortable, perhaps vulnerable, but challenged. But like I use humor and welcoming in a way that I'm like, my goal was to make people feel like they should be a part of this conversation and not like really angry. So, and there's a time and a place for all of those feelings, but I think for me, I was really invested in trying to make sure that my mom and her whole circle of friends could read this, feel challenged, but not that I hate them, which is never the case, really.
Right. Nice. All right, and it's selling everywhere you can find fine books?
Yeah, on the internet. Yep.
Perfect. So, are you working on something next? Are you making a round of book tours? What's going on?
I did some book tours a little earlier, or I guess later last year. And then I entered that dark writing post-book depression hole where I was like, wait a minute, there's nothing left, which is, I think, symptomatic of maybe the first book and slightly every other time you write a book. But I have just started getting really, really excited about my next book project, which is more about gender fluidity. And basically, I have been finding myself really needing mindfulness and spirituality because I'm like you said, everyone is wondering where we fit in the world. And now I'm like, okay, I need that more than I need a coming out story. But I'm finding some tension between like what a pro-trans or pro-queer mindset is of like we can take steps to self-actualize either physically or socially by changing names or something like that. And then mindfulness, which is asking you to accept what is a lot. So I'm finding a lot of conflict with those two things, but I'm really wanting to make it work together because I need both of those things in my life. So I am going to be kind of writing about just like mental health and like ultimately queer folks, genderqueer folks, trans folks, we all deserve a sense of peace that I think has kind of eluded us for a long time because we're doing so much work all the time. And so we've already talked about this a lot, like the work that we do. It's constant. So yeah, I'm going to be trying to write more about playing with the lack of peace and trying to move towards a place of peace, particularly in the context of like fluidity and gender queerness.
Nice. Where online is the best place for people to catch up with what you're doing and see your future projects?
Ansplain.com. ANNSPLAIN.com.
I love that URL, by the way.
Thank you. I was like, no one's thought of this? Sold.
Nice.
Right, there you go.
Any final words of wisdom?
I really wanted to touch on the door thing again. I just think the door metaphor is so good that like cyclical, we're coming back, and sometimes we are gonna see these demons again. Just be kind to yourself as you're opening those doors. Like you might see your own dog butt, but like we're still moving forward.
Perfect. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Annie Krabbenschmidt for being with us. Annie, thank you so much for coming and joining us on this early morning.
I'm happy to do it. It was such a delight to talk to you both.
And it's not the only time. When you finish that second book, you come back and talk to us.
Please, please. That's an important topic too.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, folks, on to our review. It's review time. Liz Faraim has come back to join us. Yay!
Yay! Good morning.
Good morning to you. Today, our review is A Portrait of a Lady on Fire. On an isolated island in Brittany at the end of the 18th century, a female painter is obliged to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman. And by wedding portrait, they mean let's tease the groom into marrying her portrait.
Yeah, basically it's a marketing deal.
I was like, okay, that was new. For those of you who don't like subtitles, this one would be a hard watch, but otherwise it's on Hulu. It's beautiful. I took a minute to get into it because the whole concept of marrying someone off to fulfill family obligation always takes me a minute to catch up to that historic reality. So, yeah, Liz, what did you think?
I will just start off by saying I thought it was fantastic from start to finish. While there was minimal dialogue, the story is really told in the gazes, in the delicate movements of the hands, the pacing, the postures, and the cinematography. Despite the lack of dialogue, there is masterful acting between the two women, one who portrayed Marianne and one who portrayed Eloise. They really built up the tension. Not to spoil too much, the foundation of their connection is built upon a lie, but their relationship really becomes something which far surpasses that. It was very striking.
Yes, it was. We should probably drop a trigger warning as well. There's a scene in here where another young woman does not want to keep a child. So if that type of scene would turn you off of this film, also just be aware it's in there. It is handled very beautifully as a point of both historic, this is what people dealt with, but also how the three women handled it after the fact and treated it as a moment to bring them closer together was actually really touching. Baz, what did you think?
I love character pieces. I love historical period pieces. This satisfied both of them for me, and I couldn't help but be struck by a couple of points in the film that really resonated for me. One, I love the introduction of the painting that is the catalyst for us seeing this story. I love that. I would love to have that as a print because I just think it was really beautiful and very, very powerful. But I have to say, one, because I work in opera and having to wear period clothes all the time when I was on stage, man, I give it to these ladies. They were some strong bitches because running on the beach in those dresses, Lord have mercy. That maid would have outdone me just in the first lap. I mean, I was just like going, oh my God, girls. And then they get in the water. I'm like, what? Wait, what? So there was that. So I kind of loved the strength, the quiet strength of women in this period, that they really were some tough ladies to live through that era. And I know for them, it was the way it was. But for us looking back on it, there is a ferocity there and a rock of community. And the other thing I was struck about was the fact that you only saw men at the very beginning and at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the community of women. even when they go to the feast, at that point in the movie, it was all the women around, and I loved how they ended up in song and how they got to the song, the way that they came to the chant that they did. I loved that. And I also loved the fact, at first it took me back, but there was absolutely no score. There was no music except for that moment, or when she tried to play the Vivaldi piece on the pianoforte. And I was like thinking, okay, this is interesting that it was true to life in that respect. The other thing that struck me was the complete irony of the maid who was trying to get rid of her unwanted pregnancy and being next to the baby who was holding her hand and playing with her, and her realization of what she was trying to give up in that moment, and the intimacy of this child playing with her nose and all this other kind of stuff was really powerful. It was really, really a powerful moment. So there are some real true gems. And I really, really loved the cinematography. I know it's a slow burn. It is one hell of a slow burn. So you have to commit to not a fast moving train. This is not a movie that will spin by. When they say it's 5 days, girl, you feel like you've lived 5 days with these women. So it's something that I think lends the air of realism to it, but it's also that austerity of no score, no dramatic score, just really kind of made you feel that era in all of the things about it that really kept women down, even to the point of the painter of her saying that she had to be crafty in painting male nudes because women weren't allowed access to that kind of situation. And the conversation the two women had about that, talking about the oppression that they both recognize, and yet still somehow finding the power within them to have that conversation and realizing the subversion that they had to achieve in order to get around that kind of thing. And that's what I loved about the film the most.
For me, regarding the music, it wasn't until the symphony that I realized that the only music in their lives was music that they created or specifically went to. There was no God score filling the air with noise. But for me, that took a different approach. I thought the director was specifically using that to show how isolated they were. I mean, I got your point of austerity for sure, because this was a very harsh place where they were living while this was going on. But also they were isolated. Like, they only could get there by boat.
Yep. Every breath, every scuff of a shoe on the floor, every ruffling of a dress, you hear it all. And it's in that silence, in that environment that they're in a lot of the time. It's just really striking.
And very French. That was the other thing that struck me. Halfway through, I was like, wow, this is really French.
Yeah.
All right. What did you think of the actual romance that developed? Liz, I'm going to pick on you first again.
It, as Baz said earlier, it was a slow burn, but the tension that builds up between the two of them, it takes time, but it really is so intense when it does finally get where they want it to go. And again, there's such minimal dialogue happening, but it's there, and it I don't know how to explain how it made me feel, but it was it got me.
Yeah. I'll second that. There was a point where I thought that, just before they got to the point before they kissed, the scene that was like a few scenes later, but the intimate moments when she's posing her and stuff, I'm just like, there was so much tension there. I'm like, girl, get me a butter knife. I need to cut this tension because it was so thick. You wouldn't need much. Just go like this. Yeah, I probably could have done it with a finger, but there was a ton of tension, and I loved the way that it built in that respect, because when you got the payoff, you knew what it meant in the end sequence where they were in the same room but would never meet again. And
Yes.
so you have it's that whole poetic thing that they touched on with the Eurydice tale that they told, that she's there, but they will no longer have that. It's the poeticism of the love that could not continue, and yet it was still strong, it was still there, they both felt it. And I thought it was wonderful that they focused on I can't remember her name now. Eloise?
Eloise is
Mm-hmm.
the one
Yeah.
being married off.
That and you just saw her crying, and every nuance of the Vivaldi piece was bringing that storm within her again, and the memory of it. And I loved the touch of the portrait of her with the book, page 28, and her finger in the book.
Oh man, that really
that hit in the field.
That was powerful, and
squeezed my heart. Squeezed my heart.
Yeah.
For me,
it was a really beautiful film.
Yeah, for me, Eloise had the one line that to me felt like their relationship was based on. It was when she had agreed to finally be seated, and they were dickering about something. But at one point, Eloise was like, "While you're standing there painting me, seeing me, I'm seeing you."
Yes.
Right.
That to me felt like the sum of their relationship, like the catalyst and sum and meat of their relationship was that they actually saw each other.
Yes.
And I like the way the camera told that too.
Oh yeah.
Because the camera played a lot into that in their first meeting, where you see her looking at Eloise from that angle where she's just like 2 or 3 steps ahead, and you get it with the hood first, and then the hood falls away, and then it's the side profiles every now and then when she turned back. And so the camera played a good part of that tension build, and it also showed you how they were starting to see each other. You could tie back to that when that moment happens that you talked about, Vance, that you could go back in head and go, oh yeah, I see, because the camera was doing the work for you, so.
Anything else about the film either of you would like to bring up?
I want to know what drugs they took that they put it in their armpits.
The armpit drug, I know. I was like,
you could fly. I'm like, what kind of Peter Pan shit is this?
Obviously some sort of hallucinogenic, but
right. It's going where? What?
Oh. And so after the first application, they moved to the second one that was a really deep close-up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
At first, I couldn't tell that it was an armpit. I'm like, what are they showing me? No,
I
it was
think
the
that
other
was,
armpit.
Supposed to be symbolic of what they didn't show, because I will say that
100%.
One complaint my wife had was they cut scene every time that they got intimate, and so there wasn't a lot of.
It was always fade to black.
Again, that was French.
Very.
We're gonna tease you with it, but we won't give it to you.
All right. Should we move on to our numbers?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Baz, do you want to start this time?
Yeah.
You started last.
Oh, do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you were last time, so.
Okay. All right. Just a sidebar before I get to actually not a sidebar, but just a side note. I just want to share this because I thought it was funny and scary at the same time. I had actually typed to both Liz and Vance, Portrait of a Woman on Fire. There is a movie with that title, and it has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. So make sure you do Portrait of a Lady on Fire, because I panicked when Vance brought that up.
But Portrait of a Woman on Fire looks like a very important documentary
It
about
does.
a trans
It looks like
firefighter.
a very good queer film as well. Yes. but it's not what we're talking about.
It's not what we're talking about. Lady.
They watch Portrait of a
Lady
Woman, they're going to go, where's the painting going on? All right. So here are my numbers. Overall, I give it a 4. Screenwriting, I gave it a 3.5, and I'm conflicted on it. I'm conflicted between 3.5 and a 5. So it's probably somewhere in the middle, but I'm going to lean on 3.5. And it's because of the long period and of cinema verite where it was just it was true to life in that respect, but at the same time it's like, okay, I get because life was like that at that time, but there was always a part of me just more, give me more, give me more, which is a good thing, you know. So that's why I say I'm conflicted, but I'm going to go with 3.5. Sound lighting score, there was no score, so Mr. Vivaldi carried it at the end. So, you know, so I gave that a 3.5. Art direction, however, I gave a 5. And that is because the art direction, while it was obviously on location in an established house of the period, they could have gone overboard with a lot of shit. And what I liked was its bare and obliqueness in the furniture selections, in the state of the furniture, in the state of the doors, and the, you know, so you definitely felt that this was a long-standing house that had been really lived in for quite some time. So I thought the art direction was spot on and the costuming was spot on. Cast 5. This was a brilliant cast. Every single person stepped up to the plate, did what was expected of them, and did it so well, you really felt you were in that era. So bravo to them. Direction, I'm going to give a 4, and only because of what Liz just cited. I think that as queer people, we want to see the culmination of that intimacy because it's what we've been long denied. So to your wife's point, yeah, you know, that's something that I think should have been more presented on camera, because it's definitely something that we as queer people, especially films that are made with the general purpose of being for our community, we really need to have that validation. It's almost a cheat when you don't get it. So I'm going to give direction a 4, although I thought it was beautifully directed and it was a gorgeous film. Queer themes presented, I'm going to give a 4. In that it was strictly just a lesbian romance at the core of it, which is, you know, pretty standard. You know, we've got that kind of thing, but the period, historical significance, the oppression of women generally in that period, and the great lengths they had to go through would move it up from a 3, which would be an average score. So I bumped it up to a 4 because I thought that all of the actresses equated themselves really well in conveying all of that in every line that was spoken, even though they were few and far between. Every word mattered. And I thought they did a really beautiful job with that in carrying the queer themes of it. So my overall is a 4.
Liz?
For me, overall, I give this a 5. Screenwriting, also a 5. I agree with there was a minimal score, but the sound and the lighting kind of overcame that for me. And I thought the absence of a score was actually one of the strengths of the film. So I give that a 5. The costuming was fantastic. I give that a 5 as well. Casting, 5. The direction, 5. Queer theme, about a 4. And for my own personal overall rating, also a 5. I just love the film.
Nice. All right. So for me, I gave production quality a 4. Kind of rethinking that, but I think I'll save that for art direction. Script screenplay, also a 4. I did feel like there was just not quite. I kept wanting more information from the women, and I know it was the script just didn't have it, and so I was like, I can't dive so deeply into their life. Like I want to dive deeper, and it just wasn't there. Sound lighting score, like Liz, I thought the silence was actually the beautiful part of the score, but also like the music at the feast. I wanted to put that song in my folk playlist. It was a really beautifully sung, and it was just the women at the feast, a cappella, stunning. It was actually better for me than the Vivaldi. I would prefer to go back and listen to that. So
Yes.
I gave the sound lighting score a 5. The lighting was also exactly on point. Diving into the art direction, costuming was brilliant. I felt that the austerity and bareness of the house actually reflected the fact that most of the family had moved to Italy by this point, and Eloise's older sister had just been imprisoned there prior to her taking her own life. And so it felt like this was the house that they had sort of abandoned for Italy. And even Eloise's mother was like, once we marry her off, we're all going back to Italy. So I actually felt like the emptiness of the house played into that narrative really well. Casting, I gave it a 4.5. I liked most everyone. There were a couple of characters I was like, not buying it. Like the midwife, I was still kind of like, not sure, but okay. She's that much of the screen, so okay, done. Direction, gave it a 4. Like Baz, I felt the director played into the long, spacious 5-day element just a little too much. I felt like there probably could have been a little more story about the women had they not done that. Queer themes presented, also a 4. In addition to this being a lesbian love story, it was a story about loss and queer loss in a historic period, which was, I'm sure, way more common than even our literature lets us know about. I mean, imagine all of the love and romance that we didn't get because the society wouldn't allow it. So my personal overall was a 4.5.
Bravo.
All right. Any final words of wisdom from either of you?
See this movie.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yes.
Definitely worth it.
And currently on Hulu for those who are looking for it, in case we didn't mention that earlier. All right. Well, Liz, thank you very much. Folks should go to lizfaraim.com. That's LIZFARAIM.com. Check out her books. Follow her on social media. She's an amazing person, folks. And we are so grateful that she has joined us for this month's review team. Now, on to what's won our week.
So, what are you on about this week?
Couple things. Lake Geneva, Wisconsin is doing its ice castles this year, and tickets sold out faster than anybody knew they were even on sale. So the pictures are pretty. I didn't get to go. I'm kind of okay with that. I still don't know how I feel about post-COVID bullshit. Nobody was wearing a mask in any of the pictures I saw, so I'm like, I know everybody wants to pretend. I think everybody wants to pretend COVID's over, but I know a friend who just this last week got hit and hit hard to where he lost his voice, couldn't speak, had trouble aspirating, was seriously considering needing a hospital bed. So I'm like, we have to be slightly more careful, people. Come on, no more public gatherings without masks. Other than that, we watched Wakanda Forever. It was lovely. Prince Namor, who in the comic books was just a white dude with wings on his feet, actually they tied him historically to Incan civilization, Mayan, Incan, that region, and they did it really well. The history was far better actually than I think the actor who played him. But the awards that's been nominated for are well deserved, so highly recommend people go watch that. And I'm still trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with our nation and daylight savings time and why this is still a fucking issue. How about you?
Okay. So mine, the first one is actually kind of a hopeful thing in that it's a story about a lesbian teacher in Connecticut. And this is via pinknews.co.uk. A lesbian teacher in Connecticut is planning to open an LGBTQ plus centered school later this year. Patricia Nicolari's proud, and which is proudly respecting our unique differences academy, aims to provide a safe and affirming and educational environment where each student can engage in rigorous curriculum free from bullying and harassment. So that's the banner under which it's proposed and what will be going on. Now, the interest from the school is not just from LGBTQ plus identifying students. Nicolari said that there are a number of queer parents who have children who are not identifying, at least at this juncture, but want a safe place where their family can be respected. So kind of a cool thing. I'm kind of loving that. And I think that there's more of that that's needed. So that's what I'm on about. Who won your week?
Nice. The state of Illinois officially banned assault weapons after several shootings. It finally hit their state legislature and officially was banned on January 10th, which I missed until this week, ironically. But yay, Illinois. I understand the reason why we have the right to bear arms. We don't have the right to bear assault weapons against each other. So thank you, state of Illinois.
Right. As that one military guy said, veteran said, I need to check out an assault rifle or assault gun when I'm on base. And I'm trained to use it. If I have to check it out, dot, dot, dot. So there you are. Who won my week? Well, it's a little bit of a combo in that the Grammys were just held. Two things happened that I think are kind of cool. One, Viola Davis finally achieved her EGOT status. So yay, Viola. We love her. Staunch ally to the community. So I love that. In the Grammys, and she won it for her book being narrated, and that's what her category was that she won. But it did achieve her EGOT status. And just to give people a rundown, she got her first Tony in 2001 for King Hedley II, her second in 2010 for the Broadway production of Fences. She landed her first Black woman to win Lead Drama Actress Award at the Emmys for being recognized in her role in How to Get Away with Murder. And her Oscar win came in 2017 when she scooped up the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the big screen adaptation of Fences. So congratulations to Viola for being an EGOT. The other thing that won my week is, so that was kind of my runners-up. My big one that won the week was the 2023 Grammys, which I did not watch, so I have to cough that up. But in retrospect, I saw a lot of what was going on with it, and the whole Sam Smith, Kim Petras unholy thing really, really riled up the right. They did a performance of the song Unholy, and they did it all in red, and it was just... He had a top hat with horns, and the religious right went freakazoid on the whole damn thing. And it's really funny because you just look at these people who are commenting on this, and you're just like, bitch, you only watch this so you could have something to rant about. They were not remotely interested in who won or who was going. This is not their crowd. It just is not their crowd. Okay, and they were saying, Ted Cruz tweeted out, this ... is ... evil, and then you have other ones coming across saying, if you want to know what they're really all about, and they're indoctrinating our children to Satan and blah blah blah. Finally somebody commented back and said, they said this shit about Ozzy Osbourne, they said this shit about the Beatles even at one point. So calm the fuck down and get a new goddamn playbook.
I'd like to point out
related news. Go ahead.
I'd like to point out that the children of the right are joining Satan's team because Satan is less evil than their parents.
Yeah, right? Thank you. Okay. And then in related news, which I thought is just highlights how fucking hypocritical they are. This is not a win, but this is a related story that just, I think, totally encapsulates how fucking hypocritical these people are. Colorado church leader is arrested on child rape charge this week. So there you go. I'm not laughing over this horrible thing, but I'm just like, you have these people screaming about the queer community, and the song is called Unholy. It's a thematic song. It has this thing, Also, shout out to Kim Petras for winning with Sam Smith on their win of Best Duo. So first trans woman to win a Grammy. So bravo, the community won big time last night. So
yeah,
totally on about that.
Nice. Any final words of wisdom?
Relax. Chill out. That's mostly for the GOP.
Right. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to our author guest, Annie Krabbenschmidt, and to our guest reviewer, Liz Faraim. Give them both some love. Hit their websites. Follow them on the socials. Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roadpodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Follow us on YouTube. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. Bum's Rush and Melody, dear.